My son and daughter-in-law kept breaking into my lake house, so I moved without telling them. And during their next break-in, they learned a lesson that cost them everything. My name is Joyce. I am 60 years old, and I spent 30 years building a real estate portfolio so I could retire in dignity. But apparently dignity is too much to ask for when you have family like mine. I pulled my Lincoln into the long winding driveway of my lake house with one specific expectation: silence. Today was day 14. This was the absolute final deadline of the 2-week grace period I had generously granted my son and his wife to find a new apartment. They swore they just needed a fortnight to get back on their feet. I expected to see a moving truck. I expected to see the driveway empty and swept clean. Instead, I saw a rusty second-hand sports car parked diagonally across the covered carport. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel and my breath hitched in my throat. That wasn't just a parking spot. That was the specific sheltered bay where my late husband Richard had kept his vintage convertible for 40 years. It was a sacred space. We had a family rule: nobody parks under the canopy. Seeing that oil-leaking piece of junk sitting exactly where Richard's pride and joy used to be wasn't just annoying. It was a direct, calculated desecration of his memory. They knew better. They just didn't care. Before I tell you how this entitlement led to a felony charge and a sunken boat, hit that subscribe button. I want to know in the comments, would you let family stay in your vacation home if they treated your property like trash? I cut the engine. Through the closed windows of my car, I could already hear the thumping bass of loud hip-hop music vibrating the front porch timbers. This wasn't a move-out day. It was a party. I grabbed my keys, the heavy brass ones that represented decades of my hard labor, and stepped out into the cold air. I wasn't walking in there as a mother coming to visit. I was walking in as a landlord facing a hostile breach of contract. The heavy oak door swung open, and the first thing that hit me was not the smell of stale air, but the blinding glare of artificial light. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes to the chaotic transformation of my sanctuary. The floor-to-ceiling curtains, which I kept open to showcase the lake view, were taped shut with blue painter's tape to block out the natural sun. Standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 3 large tripods and a halo of LED ring lights, was Sierra. My 26-year-old daughter-in-law was sitting on my antique velvet armchair, holding a glass of what looked like green juice. She was talking to her phone with a bright manufactured smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Remember, guys," Sierra chirped, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. "Wealth isn't just about money, it's about claiming the space you deserve. You have to manifest your environment." Standing behind the camera, acting as a glorified production assistant, was my son. Derek, at 32 years old, should have been packing boxes or scanning job listings. Instead, he was adjusting the lighting filter to make his wife's skin look smoother. "Cut," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through their fantasy. Derek jumped, nearly knocking over a light stand. Sierra looked up, her expression shifting instantly from influencer bubbly to annoyed teenager. She didn't look guilty. She looked interrupted. "Joyce," Sierra sighed, lowering her phone but leaving the recording on. "We are in the middle of a live session. You just ruined the intro." I stepped fully into the room, my boots echoing on the hardwood. "I didn't ruin an intro, Sierra. I am interrupting a trespassing. Look around you. Where are the boxes? Where is the luggage?" "Today is day 14. Derek finally spoke up, though he couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, relax. We just needed a few more days. Sierra's channel is really taking off. This location, it fits her brand aesthetic." "My home is not a brand aesthetic," I replied, keeping my tone icy and controlled. The agreement was clear: 2 weeks to find an apartment, no business operations, no changes to the property. You have violated all 3. Sierra stood up, crossing her arms. "I am building a life coach empire to buy us a house, Joyce. You should be supporting us. You have this huge place all to yourself. It's selfish to kick us out when I'm on the verge of going viral." I looked at them, the entitlement radiating off them like heat. I knew if I started screaming or tried to physically throw them out, now they would call the police. The officers would see their clothes, their equipment, and the food in the fridge, and they would label this a civil dispute between residents. I would be powerless. I needed to be smarter. "I am not arguing with you," I said, pulling a business card for a local motel from my purse and tossing it onto the coffee table next to their equipment. I am going to a hotel tonight because I refuse to sleep in a production studio. But this is your eviction notice. You have until 12 p.m. tomorrow. If your car and this circus equipment are not gone by noon, I change the locks and the sheriff handles the rest. Put the keys on the table when you leave. I turned around and walked out before they could see my hands shaking from rage. I drove away foolishly, believing that a stern warning was all it would take to wake them up. 48 hours of silence followed my ultimatum. I was back in my city apartment sipping chamomile tea, foolishly believing that the lack of noise meant compliance. I assumed Derek and Sierra had taken the hint, packed their equipment, and vacated my property. I was wrong. The silence wasn't a sign of surrender. It was a prelude to a more sophisticated strategy. The phone rang at 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. The screen flashed the name of my younger sister, Helen. I picked up expecting a casual check-in, but her voice was breathless and laced with artificial panic. "Joyce, thank God you picked up," Helen gasped. "I am freaking out. The lawyer for Mom's estate just called me. There is a clerical error with the cemetery plot next to Dad. They need to see the original deed immediately, or they might resell the space. I remember you put it in the wall safe at the lake house, right?" I froze. The phone felt cold against my ear. It was a lie. A clumsy, desperate lie. I didn't keep the cemetery deed at the lake house. I kept it in a safety deposit box at Chase Bank, 3 blocks from where I was currently sitting. Helen knew that. She was the one who stood right next to me 10 years ago when I locked it away. There was no emergency. She wasn't trying to save a grave. She was trying to open a door. She was the Trojan horse sent to breach the fortress because my son knew his code no longer worked. A wave of betrayal washed over me, heavier than the anger I felt toward Derek. My own sister was conspiring against me to enable their parasitism. I had 2 choices: call her out and watch them find another way to break in, or open the gate and trap them inside. "Oh, Helen, that sounds terrible." I lied, my voice steady and concerned. "We can't lose that plot. You're right, I think it might be in the master bedroom safe. Listen, I will give you a temporary guest code for the garage. It is active for exactly 60 minutes. Go in, get the document, and leave." "You're a lifesaver, Joyce." She exhaled, the relief in her voice too quick, too sharp. I gave her the 6-digit sequence and hung up. I didn't go back to my tea. The moment the call ended, my demeanor shifted from concerned sister to cold prosecutor. I opened my laptop and logged into the smart home security interface. I didn't just turn the cameras on, I upgraded the settings. I switched the recording resolution to 4K and enabled instant cloud backup. I needed every pixel to be crisp. I needed facial recognition to be undeniable. Then I dialed my attorney, Mr. Vance. He answered on the second ring. "Vance." I said, my eyes glued to the loading screen of the security feed. "Start drafting a criminal complaint. I don't have the evidence yet, but I will have it in about 10 minutes. I'm about to send you a live link." I sat back in the dark of my apartment, the blue light of the monitor illuminating my face, waiting for the motion sensors to turn from green to red. The motion sensor triggered a notification on my screen, and the garage door rolled up slowly in grainy 4K resolution. My heart hammered against my ribs, hoping against all logic to see my sister's sedan. But the vehicle pulling into the bay wasn't Helen's sensible Toyota. It was a rented cargo van. The driver's door opened and Derek stepped out. He walked around to the passenger side, opened it for Sierra, and then in a moment that made my stomach turn, they high-fived. "I told you she'd buy the cemetery story." Derek laughed, his voice captured clearly by the garage's sensitive microphone. "Mom is so predictable when it comes to family guilt. Your Aunt Helen is the real MVP." Sierra smirked, checking her reflection in the van's side mirror. "Now let's get this place branded before the crew gets here." They didn't just walk in, they invaded. Behind them, 2 men in generic work uniforms unloaded a massive flat object wrapped in bubble wrap. I switched the camera view to the foyer. "Right there." Sierra pointed to the main entryway wall. "I want the logo centered." I gasped. That wall was paneled in quarter-sawn antique oak original to the house and installed by master carpenters in the 1920s. It was irreplaceable. One of the workmen hesitated. "Ma'am, that looks like vintage hardwood. You want us to drill directly into it?" "Just do it," Sierra snapped. It's my house. I want the Sierra's Retreat acrylic sign up now. I watched in horror as the workman pressed a power drill against the dark, lustrous wood. The high-pitched whir of the drill bit biting into the timber felt like it was piercing my own skin. Sawdust fell onto the floor like fresh wounds. Within minutes, a tacky neon-pink plastic sign was bolted onto the historic wood. But they weren't done. Derek began pulling my art collection off the walls, landscape oil paintings I had collected over 30 years. "This stuff is too gloomy," Sierra critiqued, waving a hand dismissively. "It doesn't fit the wellness vibe. Derek, move it all to the boathouse storage." "No," I shouted at the screen, though they couldn't hear me. The boathouse storage was uninsulated and damp. One night in that humidity would warp the canvases and breed mold. They were effectively destroying tens of thousands of dollars in art through sheer negligence. My hand flew to my phone. Vance. I nearly screamed into the speaker. "They are drilling into the antique oak. They are throwing my art into a damp shed. I am calling the police right now." "Stop." Vance's voice was calm, authoritative. "Don't do it, Joyce." "Are you insane?" I snapped. "I am watching them vandalize my home." "Listen to me," Vance commanded. "If you call the police now, they will see a few holes in a wall and some moved furniture. It's a civil matter. They might get a fine, but they won't get evicted and you won't get a restraining order. To get them out permanently, to make sure they can never come near you again, we need a felony. We need undeniable major property damage or a direct threat to safety." I watched Derek carelessly stack a priceless watercolor painting onto a dolly like it was scrap wood. Tears of rage pricked my eyes. "So I just let them destroy it," I whispered. "You let them dig the hole deep enough to bury themselves," Vance said, cold. "Wait for the major damage. It's coming." I lowered the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. I was shaking with the terrifying clarity of the trap I had to let them spring. I wiped the frustration from my face and composed myself. Vance was right. Anger would not evict them. Only strategy would. I needed to disappear. I needed them to believe that the castle was unguarded, that the dragon was asleep, so they would feel safe enough to set the whole kingdom on fire. I opened the family group chat, which had been silent for days, and typed the lie that would seal their fate. Unexpectedly called to the foundation board meeting in Washington, D.C. regarding the new grant cycle. I am flying out tonight. I will be in closed-door sessions for 3 weeks. No cell service. Do not contact me. I hit send. Then I turned off my main phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I picked up the burner phone I had bought at a gas station an hour ago and opened the security app. The reaction on the screen was instantaneous. Derek read the text out loud in the kitchen. For a second there was silence. Then Sierra shrieked a high piercing sound of pure victory. 3 weeks, she screamed, grabbing Derek by the shoulders and shaking him. "Do you know what this means? We don't have to hide the launch. We can go massive." "Are you sure?" Derek asked, though he was already grinning. "What if she comes back early?" "She won't. She's obsessed with that foundation." Sierra dismissed him, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Text the promoter. Tell him the Lakeside Luxury Retreat is a go for Saturday night. We are charging $500 a ticket. VIP access to the boat and the wine cellar. We are going to make a fortune, Derek." I watched them toast with my vintage Chardonnay clinking glasses to their own destruction. They weren't just throwing a party anymore. They were running an unlicensed commercial venue in a residential zone. They were selling tickets to a property they didn't own. I didn't go back to my city apartment. Instead, I drove 5 miles down the road to the Shady Pine, a budget motel that smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes. It was a stark contrast to my lake house with its threadbare carpet and flickering neon sign outside the window. But it had a direct line of sight to the main road leading to my property. For the next 2 days, I lived like a ghost. I sat in a plastic chair by the motel window, binoculars in hand, watching the delivery trucks roll by. I logged every single violation in a notebook. Thursday 2 p.m. a catering van arrived. Friday 10 a.m. a sound system rental truck. Friday 4 p.m. cases of liquor being unloaded by men who were definitely not licensed bartenders. My heart ached seeing strangers invade the sanctuary I had built with Richard, but I forced myself to stay put. I wasn't just a mother watching her son fail, I was a hunter waiting for the prey to step fully into the trap. The trap was set for Saturday night. All I had to do was wait for the music to start. Saturday night arrived not with a sunset, but with a bass line that shook the windows of my motel room 5 miles away. On my laptop screen, the feed from the lake house was a kaleidoscope of flashing strobe lights and bad decisions. My quiet sanctuary had been transformed into a chaotic nightclub. Dozens of strangers were trampling my hydrangeas, holding red plastic cups filled with the vintage Bordeaux I had been saving for my 65th birthday. At 10:45 p.m., the motion sensor on the boathouse camera triggered. My stomach dropped. Through the grainy night vision, I saw Derek stumbling down the wooden walkway of the dock, a half-empty bottle of champagne in his hand. He was followed by a group of cheering, intoxicated guests. He wasn't heading for the jet skis. He was heading for the covered slip at the end of the pier. No. I whispered to the empty motel room, my hand flying to my mouth. Not the boat. He fumbled with the canvas cover, revealing the polished mahogany hull of Richard's 1955 Chris Craft. That boat was not just a vehicle, it was a member of our family. It required a delicate touch, a sober captain, and respect. Derek had none of those things. He keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life with a throaty growl that usually made me smile, but tonight it sounded like a scream. "Get in," Derek shouted over the engine, slurring his words. "Midnight cruise, who's coming?" Sierra was standing on the deck filming the whole thing. "Go baby, show them how we live," she shrieked, egging him on. Derek slammed the throttle forward. He didn't untie the stern line properly. The boat lurched, the engine screaming against the resistance before the rope snapped. The classic boat shot backward, not out toward the open water, but in a clumsy, drunken arc. Crunch. The sound was audible even through the laptop speakers. The bow of the heavy wooden boat smashed violently into the main load-bearing pillar of the dock. The impact was sickening. The Chris Craft rebounded, its beautiful chrome prow crumpled like tin foil. Water immediately began pouring into the hull. Panic erupted on the dock. Guests screamed. Derek killed the engine, standing up and swaying, looking at the gash in the boat. "It's taking on water," he yelled, panic finally piercing his drunken haze. "It's sinking." This was the moment where a rational person would call for help. But Sierra, terrified of losing her perfect party narrative, took charge with disastrous confidence. "Don't let it sink," she commanded, pointing to a heavy-duty steel cable winch attached to the decorative railing. "Tie it to the railing, winch it up, pull it out of the water." "Sierra, no," I hissed at the screen. The railing was decorative cedar. It was meant to hold flower pots, not a 2-ton boat filled with water. Derek and 3 other men wrapped the steel cable around the boat's cleat and cranked the winch attached to the railing. The cable pulled tight. The wood groaned under the impossible tension. Snap. It wasn't just the railing. The entire structural integrity of the dock section, already compromised by the pillar crash, gave way. With a thunderous crash, a 20-foot section of the dock collapsed into the dark water, taking the winch, the railing, and 2 screaming guests with it. Silence fell over the party, broken only by the splashing of people trying to swim to the shore. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding a cold, hard rhythm. I didn't cry. I calculated. I opened my spreadsheet. Vintage Chris Craft hull repair and engine restoration. $25,000. Custom cedar dock structural reconstruction. $35,000. Environmental cleanup fees for fuel leakage. $5,000. The total flashed in my mind, $65,000. We had crossed the line. This was no longer a party foul. This was felony criminal mischief in the first degree. This was a prison sentence. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. My voice was steady, void of any maternal softness. "Dispatch, this is an emergency at 404 Lakeview Drive. I am the property owner watching a remote feed. There is a boating accident involving intoxicated operators, structural collapse, and massive property destruction. Send the sheriff and the Marine Patrol. Send everyone." The response was overwhelming. Within 10 minutes, the calm darkness of the lake was shattered by blinding blue strobes. 2 Marine Patrol boats flanked the sinking dock from the water, their spotlights pinning the wreckage like a crime scene. Simultaneously, 3 sheriff's cruisers blocked the main driveway, cutting off any escape route for the panicked party guests. I arrived just as the officers were pulling my son out of the water. Derek was shivering, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket, but the smell of alcohol on his breath was potent enough to be detected from 5 feet away. A Marine patrol officer was already conducting a field sobriety test. Derek stumbled, failing to walk a straight line on the grass. Derek, last name, you are under arrest for boating under the influence and reckless operation of a vessel. The officer stated, spinning him around to click the handcuffs shut. Near the house, the scene was even more chaotic. Sierra was screaming at a deputy who was trying to escort her to a cruiser. "Get your hands off me!" she shrieked, her mascara running down her face. "I am the event organizer. This is a private residence." "Exactly," the deputy replied calmly. "And the owner is standing right there." He pointed to me. I stood next to my attorney Vance, watching the empire of lies crumble. Sierra's face went pale. She looked from me to the police, and then, in a desperate attempt to save herself, she threw her accomplice under the bus. "We had permission," Sierra yelled, her voice cracking. "His Aunt Helen gave us the access code. She told us we could stay here. She is the one who let us in." Vance leaned over to the lead officer. "Did you get that statement on your body camera that implicates Helen, last name, as an accessory to burglary and criminal trespass?" The officer nodded. "We have it recorded, ma'am." Helen had just lost her family status and gained a criminal record in one sentence. As they led Derek past me toward the squad car, he stopped. His eyes were red, filled with the terrifying realization of what was happening. "Mom," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "Mom, tell them it's a misunderstanding. Call the lawyer. Bail us out, please." I looked at my son, the man who had desecrated his father's parking spot, destroyed his father's boat, and sold tickets to my home. I didn't see a child anymore. I saw a stranger who would bleed me dry until I was dead. "I am not your bank anymore, Derek," I said softly, my voice steel. "And Mr. Vance is not here to defend you. He is here to represent the plaintiff. I am not posting bail." "You can't leave me in there," he screamed as they pushed him into the back seat. "I can," I replied. "You wanted to live like an adult. This is what adult consequences look like." I watched the taillights of the police cars fade into the night. The silence returned to the lake, heavy and expensive. The next morning, I signed the permanent restraining order against Derek, Sierra, and Helen. I put the lake house on the market 3 days later. I realized that some rotting limbs cannot be healed. They must be severed to save the body. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but as I locked the door for the final time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free.